Well, hello and welcome again to today's History in Upper Ohio Valley. I'm your host, Bob Connors, and we have an interesting program planned for you. Locally in St. Clairsville, Ohio here, we've had a couple of hospitals close, and we're going to talk with a doctor who can fill us in on how this comes about and what people might need to know about medical care in the future, and what you might need to know no matter where you are in the country. This could happen in your town where you could lose your hospital. That's a pretty serious thing. Dr. Gabriel Sella,
Nice to meet you.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate you taking time to come in here and explain this to us because we don't know much about how hospitals work.
I will share what I know.
And folks at home probably don't know much about how hospitals work. So maybe you can help us out with that. But as we start, first I guess we should find out a little bit about you. And what is it that got you into medicine? What sparked that little thing in your head that said, I'm going to be a doctor?
When I was a kid, I was told by my family that I'll be a doctor.
Oh, that works. That works.
Sometimes it worked. It worked in my case.
It worked just fine. Is that what happened? They said
Yes,
you're gonna be a doctor?
exactly.
That is excellent. You're going to be a doctor. I love it. The other one is, how long have you been practicing here in the Valley?
31 years and over.
31 years?
Yes.
Wow, that's a long time.
My
I know.
kids grew up here. My
They did?
younger one was a few months old, and my older one was 4 years old when we moved to the Valley from Western Ohio.
Wow.
And I've been here ever since.
So this is their hometown. Huh?
This is their hometown.
It's your hometown.
Yes, sir.
And it's a wonderful place.
Yes,
It
sir.
really is. Can you explain a little bit about what kind of medicine you practice to give us an idea what?
I am a family physician with a few subspecialties: pain management, disability evaluation, nutrition and metabolism, and a few others, but that's in general what I practice. So my patients get the benefit of my general knowledge in all these areas and perhaps more.
Yeah.
And of course, I refer to specialty whenever it's necessary.
Oh, okay. Can you explain what happened to these local hospitals here in the Valley? We had Martins Ferry closed and Ohio Valley Eastern and Wheeling, West Virginia closed. And that's a big hit for a small community like this, the Valley, to lose two hospitals.
Yes.
So can you just kind of give us an idea how they closed?
First of all, for me, it's not only the loss of two hospitals that I worked with, it's a loss of 31 years of having a practice in this community, Belmont County and Ohio County, and believing that I'll be working here until the day that I retire. And all of that, the ceiling fell off, and the floor was taken from under me and other 40-some physicians. So what happened is a community tragedy, and I'm not saying the word tragedy easily. And the tragedy is for all of us, but it is so much more for the elderly people in the community who some midnight, wintertime, will need an ambulance to be taken on an emergency basis to a local hospital, and there is only one local hospital left. And there will be no room at that hospital, and that means traveling somewhere 20 to 40 miles away or 60 miles away, or helicopters and the like, and ambulances that may take 2, 3, 4 hours to get there with all goodwill.
Right.
So it is a tragedy for the community. This is something that should not happen. And when you ask me what happened, of course, I don't know the full answer any more than anyone else, except for very few who are probably smiling under their chins right now. I believe that community hospitals should be community hospitals and non-profit. I'm not saying they shouldn't make a profit, but you cannot transform the electric plant or the water plant or the gas company into for-profit, or if not, will turn off the electricity at will or the water at will because we are the owners.
Yeah.
Community hospitals should be owned by the community. Ohio Valley Medical Center and East Ohio Regional Hospital, or as we all call it, Martins Ferry Hospital, have been here for over 100 years.
Wow.
I can testify because I worked at Martins Ferry for most of my time. I worked at OV, I worked also with Wheeling, that this hospital was always profitable and very, very busy, always, as we say, in the black, until the last few years were from one day to the next, people were taken away, specialties were taken away, obstetrics was closed. A number of things that were profitable and needed by patients just simply disappeared.
So,
And then,
so just let me interact here just a little bit. So along the way here in recent years, specialties are taken out of the Martins Ferry Hospital,
Yeah.
and services that they had are no longer available, and those are profitable things
Yes.
for the hospital, and that's gone, right?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead. That's
So, after all that was taken away, then they came back to us doctors and said, what can we do? Well, after you suck me dry, what more do you want to do? So this is when the idea came to me that this is not only Martins Ferry and Wheeling, West Virginia, this is small town America. These are thousands upon thousands of hospitals and communities that are in this predicament. The next one will probably Fairmont, West Virginia, with Fairmont Medical Center, that is also owned by Electo. And they started firing people. Same pattern that they did with us. That these should not exist. We should not be sold to some place for profit that can close us at will. That small town America deserves its community hospitals to be supported by the community under a general federal law and regulations, all maintaining some independence, some autonomy, of course, but that they cannot be for profit, no more than the electric company can say, I don't like you, I'm going to turn off the electricity in St. Clairsville.
so you're thinking every small community should have at least one
Definitely
nonprofit
one.
community hospital.
Yes, supported by the board of directors and supported by the community truly, not just sitting at the table for dinner.
Right.
Supported truly because the people of the community deserve to have a community hospital where their lives will be taken care of rather than at risk as they are now.
Right. Well, that makes sense. I think there are a lot of people who are out there who would agree with you that every community should have a hospital.
Yes.
And that would be one way to make sure that happens, that
Yes.
it wouldn't be the only hospital. Others could come into that community, but they must have at least one that offers some basic service because it's a humanitarian issue.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Just a few days ago, I'm not sure exactly of the details, on 470, that's one of the two main highways that we have. Apparently, there were a few helicopters taking people somewhere. Those people would have gone to Ohio Valley Medical Center because that place is about 2 miles away.
Right.
Or they would have gone to Wheeling Hospital, but Wheeling Hospital is overwhelmed. And more likely than not, they were taken to Pittsburgh or Morgantown or somewhere by helicopter. Huge cost,
Right.
huge peril of riding. Now it's still summer, early fall. Winter is coming. What's going to happen then? People will die in the name of, let's sell our souls to somebody for profit, somebody from California who doesn't have any responsibility to us and care.
Yeah, they just have an investment, and you're just an investment number.
Most important investment is in people.
Yeah.
And that's what community hospitals did have and should continue to have.
It should, with this thing with Martins Ferry and the Wheeling Hospital, they were taking the profitable things out of Martins Ferry to Wheeling, obviously because they thought they needed more money in Wheeling. But it also went broke.
Yes.
So
No, let's not confuse. Wheeling Hospital is not broke.
I'm not talking about the
Ohio Valley Medical Center
Ohio Valley
is broke.
Medical
Yes,
Center. That's what
yes,
I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
And-
you need local management, good management, and true responsibility to the board of directors and to the community. No secrecy. There is no need for secrecy. You know, you're there to serve the people, to save people's lives. You're not
Right.
there to put millions in your pocket, and then come what may.
Yeah, well, there's this company, and I think they're from Irvine, that company that owned these hospitals. What is it called?
Electo. Well,
Electo. I think they're from Irvine.
Well, lately, in the past 3 days, I learned, whatever the truth is, that they were nothing but the administrator, that the owner is something called MPT, whatever the truth is.
Yeah.
That they all of a sudden, up to now we were told exactly that Alecto owned the hospitals, and now we are told, no, Alecto was just the administrator and MPT, whoever they are, and who knows who owns the MPT, maybe somebody from Abu Dhabi, for what I know, for what you know.
Nobody knows who owned it.
Exactly, but I can tell you my answer. Martins Ferry Hospital should belong to Martins Ferry, Bridgeport, local communities.
Right.
Ohio Valley Medical Center, Wheeling, local communities. And they should be non-profit, well-regulated, well-managed, and profitable. They have to be profitable to stay alive.
Right. There has to be a profit in there or you can't
Sure.
keep it open.
Sure, but there are enough people in the overall community to support our hospitals. They hardly have to go anywhere else outside Wheeling and this area here.
Yeah.
We're not talking super duper cancer surgery that is needed by one person in 100,000.
Yeah.
But community hospitals should belong to the communities.
Yeah, well, obviously it worked here for 100 years or so.
Yes, and it worked
So-
well.
And it worked well.
And with pride.
Yeah.
And to think that all of a sudden 1,100 people are left out like nothing. No work. How many of them will find work?
Right.
It's a specialty.
Yes.
Health is a
yeah,
specialty.
Yeah.
How many will find work? How many families depended on the health insurance?
Many.
That I just looked across the street from us, and it's Nichols Bakery and United Dairy. How much business will they lose?
Yes.
McDonald's and Subway at the corner, how much business will they lose? All the other local businesses, how much business will they lose in the name of profit by a company from California that apparently now it was only managing and it belonged to a company from somewhere else and who knows where it ends.
And we don't know anything about
No,
that.
and that should not be allowed in the United States of America. We are responsible, all Americans are responsible for America and for the small communities, and small communities are over 50% of this country.
Yeah, and that amounts to millions and millions and millions of people.
Over 100 million
Yeah.
people.
That's just an amazing thing.
And they deserve better. They are good working Americans who deserve to have health care.
Yeah, that is true. And the people who work at the various hospital facilities here, they were good people doing a good job every day.
Yes, sir.
As expected, and for reasons has nothing to do with them. Boom.
I am proud of all my colleagues, doctors, nurses, technicians of whatever kind. We all smiled at each other and said hello and talked, and it was a family.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful feeling to go to work
Yeah.
and to take care of people and to know that those people are well taken care of inside your office and outside your office.
Right. That's just what makes it so difficult for the community, and it could happen to any community.
It will happen to communities unless we look outside the frame, outside the box, and do something about it now, not in the future somewhere, maybe.
Right. They do have to come up with some kind of a plan, but hopefully they'll start getting out of the box and thinking
I
about
should hope so.
how to do it. What do you think will happen to these local hospitals now?
Well, in the area we will have Wheeling Hospital, and Trinity is trying very hard to come into this area, which is interesting because they are 20-some miles away, but they are trying. They hired a number of physicians, and they will open offices in St. Clairsville and perhaps elsewhere.
Who's that?
Well, Trinity Hospital from Steubenville.
Oh,
Steubenville,
Trinity.
Weirton, yeah. But, you know, to take those patients from here to Trinity, it's 20-some miles away. It's sort of difficult, but they want to get into the area, and by all means, they should get into the area and compete. And they hired a number of physicians who worked at Ohio Valley and at East Ohio, and will probably offer them services in St. Clairsville and elsewhere in the community. I personally am signing with a new outfit called Cleveland Prime Health, and I'll be doing family practice just one block away from here. And
Yeah, that's pretty handy.
yes, on East Main Street, and that hopefully will be the end of my career. And I'm looking forward to get my patients again and to to be working full-time with them again.
So find a place where they can find you.
But exactly, but people should not be left desperate. Where is my doctor going? What's my doctor going to do? Will I have a doctor?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are a lot of people out here who are thinking that.
Yes.
What's going to happen to my doctor? Where do I go now?
Yes.
Do you have any idea of what will be happening? How many doctors are we losing out of these two hospitals?
Well, these two hospitals, we were in the medical group around 43 doctors. I cannot tell you how many have left the area or are retiring or are leaving the area. A number will. A smaller number are going to work with Willing Hospital or Trinity. People like myself, Dr. Mejia, Dr. Dario, Dr. De La Cruz will be working with this new outfit called Cleveland Prime Health here and also in Yorkville. And so patients will not be left without care.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they will be left with the type of care that they've been used for over 100 years.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. And, I know for me personally, I build a personal relationship with my doctor. I trust my doctor with things that I wouldn't trust with anybody else. And if all of a sudden somebody snapped him out of there, I have to start all over and find somebody I can build a relationship with. Because you really have a relationship with your doctor.
Yes. Which is not the case for these people going to the urgent care places. Now, they are good, but they are places that you go for some kind of a small emergency, not as a personal involvement and knowledge. Just as it is important for you as a patient to know your doctor, it is just as important for the doctor to know you.
Yeah.
Just as important, because it is a question of trust. And trust gets harder and harder in our generation.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So I guess we have to wait and see what's going to happen, huh?
Yes, but we should wait actively. Yeah. And we should really look forward to looking outside the box and to reframe small community America healthcare.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
They don't need the reframing of the university healthcare, tertiary care. They need reframing of the community healthcare.
Yeah, that makes sense. We want to have somebody local and you get to know who they are. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
That I really wish the best of luck to my patients, present patients and future patients, for me and for anyone else who wants to dedicate their lives to continue to give them good family practice care or any specialty care.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to close with this. It's been really interesting having you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a pleasure meeting you, Dr. Sella.
Likewise, sir.
So hopefully we'll see you around in the area
You'll
here.
see me 1 block away from here.
1 block away in St. Clairsville.
God willing.
Well, that's today's History Upper Ohio Valley for today. Not always the best of news, but something we needed to talk about. Hopefully we'll get some answers coming up soon on what to do with our medical health. But in the meantime, on behalf of the great people at ESV Teleproductions, I want to say we'll see you next time. I'm Bob Connors. See you later. Well, welcome to today's History Upper Ohio Valley. I'm your host, Bob Connors, and we have an excellent guest today, someone that I really respect and am so proud that you decided to come here and visit us.
Thank you, Bob.
Sharon, it is great to have you here, and you are Ohio State Supreme Court Justice.
I am the 154th Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court and the 9th woman to serve at the court.
And it's Sharon Kennedy. You got that Kennedy name going for you.
I do. The love of the Irish.
And we all love Irish. Anyway, I want to just ask you one question before we really get going here about what drew you to do what you're doing to become a Supreme Court Justice? That's a pretty lofty goal in life. What attracted you there?
Bob, I have to tell you that really it's a life journey. It is the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. As I tell many young people as I speak in high schools, junior highs, that you actually have to look at my pathway to justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio by way of the poem. So Robert Frost writes that you can, walking down a path, you see the end so very clearly, And all of a sudden, as you're walking on that path, another path emerges from the woods. It wants for where, you can't really see around the bend, the growth is over, and you choose to take that path. And that's really how my life unfolded. I started very earnest at 10 years old of all I wanted to do was to be a police officer. And I achieved that. But serving in law enforcement was when I really had the opportunity to meet a lawyer and a judge. And it reminded me of the conversation. It was 5 minutes. In a lifetime, it's probably 5 minutes of throwaway. But my teacher, Mr. Shearing, made such an impression on me. I had taken an elective, a general law class. And at the end of the class, he said, Sharon, you excelled so well at this. You got straight A's. You can tell you're very passionate about the law. Law enforcement is not a ceiling. It's a floor. And I actually, at 17, told Mr. Shearing it wasn't possible for somebody like me. My parents were born into the Great Depression. My dad grew up in public housing. My mom grew up in a 3-room cottage. I was the first to go to college in my family. So for my socioeconomic upbringing, never having met a judge or a lawyer, I really believe that was beyond my grasp. Even though the rules are very simple for achieving your American dream, according to my parents, decide, commit, work hard, have fortitude. That's it. Those are the only rules. But really looking at what a lawyer was, I thought in my mind at 17, having never met one, I just really felt that it was someone that came from great affluence or generational lawyers or their parents were doctors or dentists, not somebody like me. But law enforcement was that pathway. I saw it very clearly, but all of a sudden you meet your first lawyer and your first judge, and there were a lot of very wealthy young men and women. There were a lot of generational lawyers. But there were a lot of them just like me, whose parents were just like mine, who grew up poor in the Great Depression, who they themselves were the first to go to college. And it was really then I could see that path emerge. So I left law enforcement, and then I go to law school. I began clerking for a judge who grew up poor in the Irish ghetto of New York, found his pathway out through the Marine Corps during Vietnam, then into the FBI, and then into private practice, and I became his law clerk.
Wow.
And it was literally our last day together as I was embarking on my new career as a solo practitioner. As he's throwing that file in the bin, he says, well, kid, what do you want to do? And I said, Judge, I want to be just like you. I want to try a lot of cases, and someday I want to be a judge. And he said these words to me. Kid, you're so young, so ambitious, you could make it all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court.
Wow.
And I laughed at Judge Crehan and said, Judge, that's not possible. I'm not one of those. And in my 30s, I think I'm not one of those really meant, I believe, to run statewide, you had to be wealthy, you had to be politically connected. What I didn't realize was the promise of America is just that. It's a promise. You can achieve your American dream as long as you follow the rules of my parents.
Wow.
Decide, commit, work hard, have great fortitude, and you too can be a Supreme Court justice.
Isn't that great? That's
It was
great.
an amazing.
Those lights come on like that in life, and it's great to see someone who took advantage of it. That's excellent. What a great story.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about our viewers out here and how they might be connected to the third branch of government, being onto the Supreme Court. How are they connected to that?
I think that your viewers are connected to the judicial branch just by the way the founders crafted this great country. So if you step back in time after declaring our independence, what are those things they say in the Declaration? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those rights that come from our Creator are protected against by the overreach of government. And how did the founders do that? By way of the Constitution. But if you look at the crafting of the Constitution, and there are multiple layers of separation of powers, but the overarching separation of powers is the republic. We're not a democracy, we're not a monarchy, we're not a dictatorship. Yes, we have democratic undertones because we vote, but we're a republic. Our voice rests with the legislative branch. The executive branch goes forth and gives effect to our will and the laws created by the men and women who represent us. But the third branch of government sits idly by and waits for the case and controversy to come to decide what the words are in the statute, not to rewrite it or legislate. We're even more connected to our third branch of government here because, unlike the federal government, if you think about how judges are appointed, it's the president that makes the selection as confirmed by the Senate. And to remember that federal judges, under the Constitution, are appointed for life. And as a result of that, in that process, we have little say other than our representatives and who we have as a president. But here in Ohio, we are even one step closer to that connection. Because in 1851, after the great debates at the Ohio Constitution Convention, we took back the power of appointing judges by the legislative branch to voting for judges. So we are connected like we are connected to our representatives. It was the gentleman from Fairfield County, Mr. Robertson, who, to paraphrase him, basically said, "We have long endured this democracy, and we understand what it means to hold our elected officials accountable to us. And we hold them accountable every time November comes, and we either vote for them or vote them out." In the same way, he was saying, by taking over this power, by voting for our judges, we have the power to hold judges accountable to what we believe their role in government should be. You are so connected to your court system, whether it's your municipal and county court, your court of common pleas, all the divisions of it, your appellate court and your Ohio Supreme Court, because you elect the men and women who serve you, Bob. Same with all your viewers.
Yeah.
This is their government, not mine.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent thing to understand, and I think our viewers probably just learned something. No, thank you. Judicial activism and judicial restraint happens, and I wonder if you could just talk to that for a few minutes and explain how important it is and why we have that going on. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
That's okay. There are two different ends of the spectrum, and it really comes down to what you believe the role of the third branch of government should be. Judicial activists would say that they believe that they stand in the seat and they should move the law around or forward. It should be progressive. One of the most prolific speakers on this was the former Chief Justice Sella, who actually said that when God and the people made him the Chief Justice, he actually told the people he was not going to be a liberal or conservative judge. He was going to be progressive. And he was going to change the law to the way he best saw it fit for Ohio. That essence of judicial activism, when he makes the quote of, he believes judicial activism is necessary to dust off the laws of the books, of the laws that no longer should exist or are antiquated. That's a different perspective from judicial restraint. Judicial restraint goes back to those founding principles. So if I take you back in time to our first conversation when we talked about the separation of powers, you know, the founders, if you think about it at that time, the colonists didn't have that great phone. They weren't getting the information across the colonies by way of phone or telegraph. 3 men set about writing the Federalist Papers and explaining to the colonists why this first original constitutional supremacy form of government was so important, why they should ratify this form of government. Why should we have a republic? And in writing the Federalist Papers and explaining why we should have a legislative branch and they should have these powers, and why we should have an executive branch and have these powers, at Federalist Papers 78, they began to explain why the federal judiciary should be appointed, not stand for election, and be appointed for life. In talking about the separation of powers, They really reconciled that the courts, they themselves, the colonists should not fear them because they would only have reason. They would not have power of the taxation purse or power of the standing army. At the time that this grand experiment was being debated in Independence Hall, Montesquieu, a great philosopher from France and a judge himself, said of all the branches, the judiciary would be the weakest, almost next to nothing. And really, we hearken judicial restraint as, because I wear a robe, I don't get an extra vote. I don't get to put my thumb on the scale of justice and say, this is the outcome that I want because Sharon Kennedy, the person, thinks this is best. I don't get to erase the words that you have commanded be written in your statutes. I don't get to add words to the statute either, Bob. All I get to do is give effect to the words that are written on the page. And if the General Assembly has defined those words, then I use their definitions. If they haven't defined those words, then I pull out the dictionary, commensurate to the time. Sometimes at the Ohio Supreme Court, we're called to decide what is the language of a provision of the Ohio Constitution that was written in 1911. We pull out a 1911 dictionary. What did those words mean then? What was the effect of what they were writing? What is the intent? That judicial restraint is iconic. President Reagan spoke of what judicial restraint really meant at the investiture ceremony for Chief Justice William Rehnquist and Associate Justice Antonin Scalia. He said the question about judicial restraint, the question is never, will we have liberal or conservative courts? The Constitution isn't liberal or conservative. The question is, as the founders put it, will we allow our republic to live? And the only way our republic works is if those who wear black robes and serve in the judiciary exercise judicial restraint, that they don't add their voice to the law. Because in this republic, our voice starts in the first box, the legislative branch.
Yeah.
That's exactly why judicial restraint is so important. It is why I am committed to judicial restraint. As a citizen of this great country, I do have a voice, just like you, Bob. I get to vote for the men and women I want to represent me. I get to pick up the phone and say there should be this law, but not that law. But I don't have a third voice because I wear a black robe and I have a pen to say what the law is. I don't have the opportunity to evade it or invade it and actually write something else. I tell young people, when they ask me why I wear a robe, to me, we wear a robe to insulate the law from ourselves, from our own personal views. And that's why your viewers should care about judicial restraint.
Wow, you know, I happen to be a big restraint guy, so I agree with everything you said.
Fantastic. We'll get along famously.
That's my prejudice, but I do believe that's the way it should be, and we will not be a republic if it stops being restraint.
You're exactly correct.
The definitions, when these laws in our Constitution were written, in many cases, the words mean something different now than they did then.
Absolutely.
So if it's going to be, if we're going to hold to it, we have to go back and look and see what the heck they meant by that.
Correct.
So I'm really feeling better already that you're a judge.
Well, I'm glad.
Another question that I hear a lot about, and I think you can tell me about, the merit selection system in picking a judge versus electing one as we do in Ohio. Could you just talk to that a little bit and explain the difference?
Well, obviously there are 50 states and there are 50 different ways to get here. So in 1851, we took the power to vote for our judges away from the legislative branch before they appointed all the judges. In some states, I'll choose Missouri because this is where it was first developed, they actually pulled together a series or a panel of individuals, and they get to do what's called merit selection. Whether that's 10 people or 14 people, those people get to decide who should become judges as confirmed by a Senate or appointed by a governor. And then they stand for what's called retention election. Both models have pros and cons. quite honestly, as someone who loves freedom and liberty and my right to vote, it's a constitutional right to vote for our judges in Ohio, and I would never give up a constitutional right to vote, ever. Yeah. For all of those who say, well, the merit selection's better, if it's really better, why are merit states, some, trying to get out of it? So Florida went to merit selection. For 10 years straight, the General Assembly has tried to get out from underneath merit selection to go back to electing. Missouri is trying to get out of the retention election system, from merit to retention election, and go to a merit selection. In other words, their review would be they go back in front of the same panel. Because what you've seen in merit selection states is that outside money is now pouring into those states to have an effect in the retention elections. In a retention election state, those judges can't raise money, or if they can, there are serious caps on that. They don't have the ability to develop those relationships, contacts, to have those kinds of traditional election toolbox that we have here in Ohio. Yeah. So you see $50 million trucked into some place like Iowa, and 3 justices of the Iowa Supreme Court are unelected. They are not retained because they didn't get enough votes on their retention election. The other peril that you see is most of these votes happen as a result of single issues. Mm-hmm. And when people tell me that, but Sharon, merit selection means politics is out of it. Really? Do you really think that 10 people even sitting around a table making merit selection, that politics is off the table? Politics is always involved in decision-making process in committees. You'll never evade that or avoid it. So for me, I'd rather have my politics up front and forward. I'd rather be able to go out and judge for myself who I am electing. It's so easy now with the internet to go out and find who's running for judicial seats here in Ohio, whether that's here in Belmont County or in my home county of Butler, and who's running for the state Supreme Court. You have such opportunities to go out and meet them, speak to them, ask them about their view of judicial restraint, and make an informed view. So I'll stick with my constitutional right to vote.
I think I would stick with that too. I like that. We're on the same page on a lot of this. And I don't know anything about the law, but I do believe in the Constitution and the way it was written, and we are a nation of laws. That's what I believe we have to do.
I think the founders have given us a great gift. And if you go back in time and think about what was going through their mind in Independence Hall, the fights they were having, the debates, they walked out of the hall angry but always came back the next day. But think about the precious gift they have given us.
Oh my! It's almost, well, that's why so many people say this is a gift from God, because it was so wonderful and so powerful what they did. It's not been done before, and it hasn't been done since.
You're exactly correct. And if for all of those who say, well, America's not so great, if that's really true, why do so many still thirst to come to America? There's a reason.
There is. And that is one thing that I don't understand, why people in this country who are citizens and who should know better keep saying things like that. Why is everybody at our door trying to get in? And nobody is trying to leave.
Exactly.
And if they wanted to, they can go. Right? So I don't get that mentality. Another area that I wanted to go over is how young people might achieve their goals. Your story is just really touching and very powerful, because I came from a family like yours, and I know what it was like for me to dig out of that and get where I wanted to go. It was not easy. And I thought the same thing. I thought, this is not for me. Those people are somehow special, and that's why they get to do those special things. So would you maybe give some advice to the young people who might be watching this about how they can do what they want to do?
Thank you. I think no truer words were ever said than what you just said. they aren't special people who get to achieve their dream. They're people who set their sights on their dream and never lose sight of it. I talk to young people about thinking in terms of blocks of time. And I've had the great privilege and opportunity to speak to many young audiences. And I still use this technique today. You know, I have a whiteboard at home and I have my next goal at the top of the board of what I want to achieve. And I write down below that goal everything I have to do in order to achieve that goal. And sometimes they have a specific order, but sometimes they don't have an order. It's just, I have to do X, Y, and Z. To put it in real terms for a young person today, let's say they want to run their own electrical company. They're in high school. What do they need to do? They need to go to a trade school, become an electrician, do the journeyman. There's a multitude of different opportunities of how to do that work, commercial or home. But if owning their own business and being an electrician is the top of the board, here's all the steps they have to do to get there. Secondly, in creating that board, find good mentors. Find people that will support you in your dream. I've had them my entire career. Mr. Shearing, as my high school teacher, taking that 5 minutes to inspire me and plant the seed. That law enforcement wasn't a ceiling, it was a floor upon which to build. Looking at Judge Crehan, when I met him, he was a criminal defense attorney, I was a police officer. I was his law clerk. For him to plant the seed of, I could make it to the Supreme Court. They're not special people. Showing me the pathway of how to engage in being an elected official, starting me out in a young person's club where we were politically engaged, helping on campaigns and understanding what that is, all of those tools. So by the time I put the word trial court judge at the top of my board, then I really knew what I needed to do. I needed to engage in my community. I needed to join civic organizations. I needed to go out and speak. I needed to have a broad-based practice of law, and I needed to have a good foundation of the practice of law before ascending to the bench. In getting to the bench, what were my goals then? I spent 14 years in the trial court, but always my goal was to make sure that when the families came through my court, their case was heard respectfully, efficiently, fairly, and to make sure that I could get them on with their life. So when that goal of being Supreme Court Justice hit that board, I went back to my roots. I went back to my core mentors. I went back to my mom. My father had passed by that time, but I went back to my mom. She was the first person I talked to talk about this new dream. I went back to Judge Crehan to say, I'm thinking about this. We had this conversation in 1991, and now I'm thinking about doing it. Talking to my friends who I had volunteered for in the political world, and really the tough questions that I had to answer for myself. You have to make sacrifices in life to achieve your dreams. Sacrifices will be made, but success is directly measured by the amount of work and sacrifices you're willing to make. When I had dinner with my friend, my greatest political advisor, Mick Krieger, he basically said, Sharon, you could do this, but here are the 10 questions you have to answer for yourself. And the first 4, Bob, were really about giving up my life as I knew it. Running statewide across Ohio means you've got to be willing to be in your car a lot.
I bet.
As you joked as we were coming up the steps to sit into the studio, the reality is I'm everywhere. Follow me on Facebook, Sharon Kennedy. I'm almost at 5,000 viewers, so we're going to flip it to a political page of Kennedy for Ohio on November 1st so that I can go beyond my 5,000 friends. But you'll see how many counties I'll touch in a day. I'll give 3 speeches or 6 speeches while still working. So if that means I get off the road at 5 o'clock at night and I start working and I work till midnight every night and I have case conference calls with my staff in order to get it done, that's what it takes. But I think that really goes back to the rule of my parents, right?
Yes, it does.
The 3 rules. There are only 3 rules to achieving your dream. Decide and commit. Put it on the board. Decide and commit. Work hard and have fortitude. You're not always going to accomplish it right off. You might see a hurdle or an obstacle, but that's not a ceiling. That's an opportunity to rise, to figure it out, to go through it, to go around it, to go over it, to find a new mentor to help you understand it and tackle it. But nothing stops you from getting to the top of your board. Nothing stops you from accomplishing your dream except for you. And finding those mentors is important because there are plenty of naysayers in your life.
Right.
I've had plenty of people who told me I wasn't smart enough to go to college. I wasn't smart enough to go to law school. I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that. What they saw are limitations. That's not me. There are no limitations in life unless you put them there. And it starts by saying these words, I can't. You can do anything you want to do. The only rule, and those are my parents' rules, the only mistake you can make in life, as my parents would say, is not trying.
Right.
And the only setback is giving up.
That is true.
Mary Pickford, who was a screen actress, once said, this thing we call failure isn't about falling down. It's about staying down.
Right.
And that's a personal choice.
Well, that is so
So
true.
fight on.
That is so true. My catchphrase is, you never lose unless you quit.
That's right.
If you don't quit, you haven't lost.
Correct.
And you keep going for that goal. So is there anything else you'd like to add to this for us?
No, thank you for your
That's it.
opportunity to be here with you today. Great to see you. Thank you to all the viewers in the Valley. And I hope they enjoy our conversation today.
Well,
May
thank
God
you.
bless everybody.
Thank you for joining us. It's been really a pleasure. Ohio State Supreme Court Justice Sharon Kennedy.
Thank you.
And that's it for this show. I want to, on behalf of the great folks at ESV Teleproductions, and I'm your host, Bob Connors, we want to tell you we will see you next time on the next edition